Thinking about Emancipation Day? Wondering how we unshackle the legacy? Centuries of pan-African slave trade? 256 years of colonial rule? And now 50 plus 2 years into independence? We're still asking, where's the lasting prosperity? Pause! Think about it with intentional thought and consider where we go from here. This week we sit down with Professor Selwyn Seymour, strategic mind, global voice, and proud Bahamian, to unravel the shackles still gripping our people, from air traffic control in Freeport to strategy classrooms in London. He's seen systems inside and out. So, what kind of strategic emancipation do we need to nurture the new life 1834 birthed, but never fully raised and realized? And how do we empower the people, body, mind, and soul, to lead a future built for us, by us? This ain't just a show. This a call to rethink, rebuild, and radiate a future where Bahamians thrive.
Something to think about with Dale Happy Knowles. What we think, we become. What we radiate, we attract. What we imagine, we surely can achieve. Let's change the narrative, 242.
Welcome to Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles. And as we said before, we want you to guide in, tune in, listen in, ask your questions. Don't be shy. Tell us where you're about, because we want this mindset to pass and radiate across the world, not just in the 242 in the Bahamas. And so we'd like to welcome Professor Seymour. How are you today, sir?
Very well, thank you, Dale, and thank you for having me. I am, as you know, in part on holiday at the moment in Spain and enjoying the weather and the culture and the food of that wonderful country.
Yes. I passed through there one time ago, for I think it was like a day or two, and I said I was going to come back, and I haven't reached yet, but I got to make it on my bucket list before I decide to leave this, or the fellow decided upstairs to take me from this place. Yeah, because I liked what I saw then, and the culture and all of that. It's interesting how so many different places have things that are similar to what we have in the Bahamas. Maybe not the same, but similar in what we do.
Yeah, in pretty much way, the British colonialized basically all of the world. Spain was doing the same thing.
Yeah, that's true.
Spain, that's why so many countries speak Spanish. That's why Spanish culture all over South America and Central America and parts of the Caribbean. And Spain, I don't think many people know this, but Spain was the richest, the wealthiest country in the world by far for about 150 years.
Wow.
And it built its wealth on the back of about 10 conquistadores who went out in the world and brought back all the gold for the queen and the monarchy in Spain.
Yeah, well, we could say that Christopher Columbus was the first to bring colonialism to the Bahamas. I don't know if that's technically correct to say that from a historic point of view, but in Bahamianese we could say anything and make it true. So.
Yes, well, strangely you mentioned Christopher Columbus. He was the first, but of course he was Italian. But he got his funding for that trip
from Spain,
from Queen Isabella from Spain, and he had to bring all his wealth back to Spain, not to Italy, because Italy refused to fund him. So it's one of those things where if you go back to the early days of entrepreneurialism, he was an entrepreneur in the sense that he was starting to do something that nobody had done before. And, the world, as far as they thought, was flat, and he was going to go over the edge. And he said, no, I'm going to go out there and find a new route to the Far East. And he ended up in the Bahamas.
Yeah. Lost, 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 lost. But Professor, we know you're not lost, and so what we want to know is that you had a very dynamic journey from Freeport through and used to control the traffic that fly in the air, and then you're all the way up in London now and Spain right now and so forth in those regions, and you're generating a lot of wealth. I talked to a few people and they tell me you're doing great things. So tell us a little bit about that journey to get from here to there and what you're doing now.
Well, actually, I started in Inagua. I'm from Inagua.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And as a young kid, I came to Nassau, like most kids do, still do, to go to high school. So I spent the next 6 years in Nassau, at the end of which I was lucky to attract a number of scholarships, and I chose one. I ended up in New York City. And at the end of those 4 years, I ended up back in Grand Bahama, where I started my career as an air traffic controller. I spent about 10 years there, and then I came back to study by way of London to do my master's. And that's how I ended back up in London. Work here for a number of years, doing things. I worked for a short while with the Bahamas Maritime Authority, and then with a group of consultants, where I got exposed to the whole idea that helping small and medium-sized businesses was quite a thing to do, because, of course, in most advanced economies, the majority of firms are always small and medium-sized firms.
Right.
In developing countries like us, the Bahamas, we tend to have a reliance on large firms. So we might think that 70% of our businesses are small, medium, but in fact, that's quite a low number compared with the advanced world, which tends to see numbers in advance of 95, 97, 98%. The United States, Canada, the UK, all that. And that's sort of work I did for about 10 years. And then I decided to pursue a PhD and ended up from there into higher education, where I am at the moment, 20 years later. Wow.
Young man. But you know, you're being modest, right? Because you have a PhD and a master's degree and a bachelor's degree. And not just academics, because a lot of people get these things, but you're applying these things in motion and so forth. And so we look forward to the wealth of knowledge that you gain from that experience to share with the audience today for some of the questions that I might be in line. If any of them seem out of whack, just say pass. We move on to the next. There's no big deal. We under the tree having a conversation. That's all we do here, right? And so forth.
Sure.
And so if we look at that then, let's see here. So I came up with this quote once we started talking about the show. And it says, mental freedom ain't a milestone, it's a movement. Strategy draws the roadmap, and legacy gives us the depth of purpose. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think with anything to do with freedom, we are encumbered by our past. And we can't really get rid of all of those connections. So in the context of emancipation, we're talking about centuries of slavery followed by centuries of colonialism. And it really is not possible really to divorce ourselves from that legacy or those two legacies. And that might seem a bit counterintuitive, but the fact is that we are, when we talk about freedom, we're talking about the interplay between free will and determinism from a philosophical perspective. To what extent are we free to actually make decisions versus to what extent are we going to be determined by our environment, our past, our legacy, etc. So when it comes to strategy, we can try to think beyond that by looking well into the future, because the one good thing about strategy is it isn't too concerned about what is happening currently. It's trying to look beyond that. It's trying to look well into the future and try to understand what we can do to ease our journey there for us and for our generations that follow, the generations that follow. So strategy is key. It is a way to think, and the way it's manifested in terms of the Bahamas, for example, is that we don't have a national development plan. Though it's been discussed for the last, I understand, about 5 years, we still don't have a document that defines our purpose, that defines our strategy, that looks well into the future, which we would use to govern our directions. So a lot of developing countries have taken the time out to do this. Barbados has done it. Jamaica has done it. Most of the countries in the Mideast have done it. So they see it, I mean, not as a prescriptive way of going about step by step into the future, but actually using it as a way to formulate those general guidelines for the country.
Right. Mm-hmm. Provide like the commercial says, stay between the lines. Once you have a framework, they let you know where you're going. You're just gonna end up somewhere.
Absolutely. Because if you don't know where you're going, any direction will take you there.
That's for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So when we look at that, then, in your view, then, how does mental freedom serve as a foundation for national prosperity?
Well, it serves in the sense that we should try to think in a way that contributes to that overall development. At the moment, our mindsets are somewhat encumbered by things from the past, mainly but also slavery. Perhaps the most dominant way in which we are encumbered by the past with regards to colonialism has to be the level with which we depend on various aspects. So I see it as 3 levels. So we depend almost impossibly. Nassau, we're extremely Nassau centric.
Yeah.
We are extremely dependent on the HLT, the hospitality, leisure, tourism industry. And we're extremely dependent on North America, particularly the United States. So when we think about being free to support national prosperity, we have to sort of break these dependencies, because, of course, whilst they may not be directly holding us back, they're certainly not contributing to our development
moving forward.
On the other hand, as well.
Wow, that's powerful there. 3, 3, 3, 3. And they say every 3 chords bind together stronger than one. So that's hard to break.
Of course.
But we have to get there.
Right? We look at one manifestation of that colonial legacy. Has to do with our career choices. If given a choice, we will elect to study one of the professions. Why? Because the British said when they were leaving, you will focus on professional services. We still see that as the way forward.
They actually said that?
That's what they left for us. They didn't see us as anything else other than being a center of professional services. So as a fallout from that, we had loads of people going to study law, still do. We have loads of people going to study accounting, still do. We had loads of people going to study 1 or 2 of those main professions. Of course, medicine, if we got everybody studying medicine, that would be a good thing. But we don't have nearly as many doctors as we do have lawyers or accountants. And that's a fallout from what we were left.
But when I was in school, it was always being told that you had to be a doctor or a lawyer. doctor or lawyer,
Yeah.
doctor or lawyer. And so that's one of the reasons why the show actually was started, is because I still hear it in some of the circles that I go, where people are saying you have to be a doctor or lawyer. And I never knew that the British actually said that to us.
Yes.
Because what I'm saying is, I tell them that there's so many other opportunities, and that's why we do the show, to try and bring on people so people could see other opportunities and things of successful people and people doing things that are successful, so that they could not feel uncomfortable with wanting to do something different than doctor and lawyer.
No, we should celebrate engineers, for example. We should certainly celebrate entrepreneurs more than we do, but we don't.
Yeah,
And that's strange.
that's a mixture of languages all mixed up there. You got to think, talk in tongues almost to understand that, right? But I guess it's because those are the two areas that made money for the kingdomship, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
So what mental operating systems must be installed to design this $100 billion reality that I talk about? And who controls the updates for that? Because that's always one of the issues, is to control, right? Who does what?
Well, yeah, well, like anything else, I think at the core of that has to be education. It has to be education. There's no other answer to that. It has to be education that drives the economy, that drives development of the infrastructure, that drives everything to do with trying to build up what we call that huge potential reality. At the moment, we have 4 economic pillars in the country. 4. That's New Providence, the lion's share. Then we have Abaco, Grand Bahama, and Exuma recently came online.
Right.
But there's no reason why we shouldn't have 6 or 8 economic pillars serving different parts of the country, being offered the same resources and capital to develop. So there's no reason why Andros shouldn't be an economic pillar. Eleuthera shouldn't be an economic pillar. Inagua shouldn't be an economic pillar. And all of a sudden we're talking not 4, but 7 or 8. And these, if balanced properly and managed properly, would see the country move toward that goal of that massive GDP, that massive growth.
Right. So you talk about the islands being the pillars, which is a good thing to think about also. So if I take my 5 pillars for the new built environment, which is the sun, sand, sea, people, and digital, we know people and digital are all over. But if we look at renewables and light industries and food security and the vulnerability, sustainability, etc., and of the sea, we could almost define each island to have its own personality, whereas in the Bahamas right now, we seem to say, okay, well, if tourism is a thing, it needs to be across the board on every island, whether it fits the islands or not. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, of course, I mean, that's the way tourism should have gone from day one. Not advertising the Bahamas as a single destination, but multiple destinations. Not trying to attract these mega hotel brands, but trying to build boutique hotels on each of the islands that have their own separate identities, that reflect the economy, the local economy and the landscape in which they're in. I mean, it's a very simple concept, but yet we have sort of circumvented that and gone after those massive Bahamas, those massive hotel bills, and they're fine. But when one of them goes out of business or goes to the wall, you lose thousands of jobs.
Right.
You would need 10, 15 boutique hotels going out of business to have that same effect. So that balancing in the economy would serve us better, again, towards this massive objective. But we could really create those boutique destinations and have individual destinations rather than talking about the Bahamas as a single tourist destination. It's not. And the sell-off of islands to cruise companies is mind-boggling.
Well, you're touching on, or they're starting to dive deeper into the mental emancipation that the show is big on, right? And so when we look at the question that I have on the screen now, okay, this question. So, how do we think as builders of value and not just managers of the leftovers, which the
Well,
British left us or whoever left us?
that has one answer, and that the answer, I mean, calls out for entrepreneurship. It calls out for creators of wealth, not consumers of wealth. We are still encumbered by this mindset that I need a job, or when I finish school, I want a job. Not I will go out and create jobs by starting a new venture of some type. Economy is the economy could be massively helped if we had a bigger focus on entrepreneurship, on trying to create wealth as opposed to just being consumers of wealth. And we wouldn't be left then just managing leftovers. We'll be creating new things that we can focus and develop and build on.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's awesome stuff right there. So we got Chanel Taylor saying good evening to us. Chanel, thank you kindly for joining us, and be sure to ask questions, because I know you're an entrepreneur yourself, and that you were right on point with Professor's comments just now. And so maybe tell us one or two things that happened to you in your journey of success in Freeport. Yes. Cool. So what mental habits keep our best ideas in draft mode, and how do we publish new ones daily?
Again, this
strategy is a pivotal point for the show, right? So we want to help people understand how to do this.
Well, it's again about trying to materialize the things that we do. That's another role for entrepreneurship when we have ideas. Father Reverend Miles Monroe always used to say the richest place in the world is the graveyard, where people have gone to their graves with their ideas, never seen the light of day. Many of them never seen fruition. You've got to try different things, because at the end of the day, if you don't, they're going to be at the same place where most of those other good ideas are, in the cemetery. So entrepreneurship is clearly one route, but this also lends itself to the other things we do. For example, in our workplaces, there's no reason why we should stifle our ideas, even if we have to work for a company. If we share those, they can become the sources of new products, new services for the companies we work with. So we don't have to be individual entrepreneurs to do that. We can do that within the corporate landscape that we're working. So keeping those ideas and sharing those ideas. A lot of people don't want to share their ideas because they think somebody's going to steal them.
Right.
But it's just an idea. You can't protect an idea. It's not quite at the level of an intellectual property that can be protected, unless you document that idea in some sort of way. Actually document it, write it down. You have no protection for that idea. It can't build any protection. Ideas can't be protected, and no intellectual property regime can you protect ideas.
And it doesn't necessarily also mean that nobody else will have that idea, because plenty of people might have that idea. And so when we have multiple people having that idea, but we might have some habits that causing us to keep it in draft. And one you say is fear, basically that somebody's going to steal it and run with it before you. But if you keep it under your arm or in your treasure chest and you're not doing anything with it, it's still not doing any good for nobody.
Of course.
Yeah. Well, my brother always, Dylan always say that the country doesn't have a vision, right? And I said, I think we have vision because we have multiple national development plans. We have not implemented them and stuck to them and committed to them. And so I think we have an execution problem. And so when we look at that, then how does strategy frame execution? So the people who have these bad habits, or I shouldn't say bad habits, but habits that are holding them back, how do they frame or use strategy in order to help them come out the gate and do what they need to do?
Well, again, strategy is about thinking into the future. I mean, one of the things with the National Development Plan is to be able to think of scenarios. Scenario planning is the holy grail of strategy because it looks 20, 30, 50 years into the future. And it really tries to get us thinking away from what is happening currently to what could be happening 50 years from now. That's what Qatar has done. That's what Dubai has done. That's what a lot of countries around the world have done. Jamaica has done it. Barbados has done it. But we still seem to have a draft version of this. And that is something that has been in draft mode, I understand, for about 5 years now. So until we actually clarify what we want and how we're going to follow and pursue those goals, we're always going to have that as a draft document somewhere gathering dust.
Right. Well, we were talking earlier offline, I think, and we were talking about the new built environment and the definition of that, right? And so when we look at that process, you had added that these were fundamentally the items that of natural things that we look at for an economy and a country and growing, but you added technology.
Yes. Because, of course, that was the basis for the most basic strategy framework, which is the PEST framework. And it looks at politics, economics, the social environment, and technology. That has now expanded to include legal and environmental aspects as well. But the idea remains the same, because using it as a framework to actually analyze a country, you get a sense of where that country is at by examining each of those aspects. Politics, economics, the social environment, and the technological infrastructure.
So if the entrepreneur-minded people out there were to pick, I guess, one of these or a couple of these and combine them, that could be basically a compass for them in terms of how they bring their products and their ideas to light, because it might be in the political space, it might be a social space or technological space, etc. So there's more opportunities for them to try and frame what they're thinking and to make it come to material life.
Well, it's actually more about the government making it possible for these things to work, these aspects to work in concert, so that entrepreneurs, businesses, companies, anything operating within that environment can operate to their maximum potential.
Right, yeah.
So it's a government responsibility to ensure that these four aspects of the environment are working for everybody within that environment. So we don't want, for example, in the political aspect, we don't want the public sector not doing things to enable business. We want the public sector working so that businesses feel enabled and they feel happy, and they're not waiting 6 months to get a land development contract or pass a contract to purchase a particular building or piece of land. These things have to be more efficient, and the government oversees that.
Cool. So if the government creates this environment, which we're pushing to happen, and I push things so that it's not that the government going to create it. The government will have no choice but to accept what is being pushed, because governments always like votes, so they're going to do whatever the masses say they want. That's my perspective on life. But so what kind of enterprise, both industries, not just businesses, and are be daring enough to design them in order to, if this environment was to be created?
You mean in the context of the Bahamas, obviously?
Yes, yeah.
Well, there's been a lot of talk recently about the blue economy,
Okay.
the orange economy. Yeah. Looking at various aspects of our being that would give opportunities for certain types of products and services. So the blue economy is a pretty interesting one, because we're a country of 700 islands, 2,400 keys or whatever it is, but we're spread over 100,000 miles of ocean.
Yeah.
And that ocean, we've used it partly. I saw a report today, the poachers in the south of the country are taking advantage of our livestock and just taking it out of the country. But there are different things we can do with that environment. We talked a lot in the Bahamas about processing our own seafoods, which used to be done apparently, but not so much anymore. It's a huge business in Spain. I mean, they absolutely can every type of fish and seafood you could think of, from octopus to sardines to mackerel to salmon to every sort of fish that you could think of, scallops, and you get this stuff live. Of course, we export quite a bit of our seafoods
and buy it back,
and have to buy it back in a process sort of way. So I mean, the blue economy is one. The orange economy, on the other hand, is one based in the creative arts, and we are we're an incredibly creative people. But that creativity has been stifled somewhat by not having the opportunities to really get those products and services manifested. Chanel, who just came on, is one of those companies that I worked with while I was in Grand Bahama.
Okay, cool.
She's out of the clearly situated in the orange economy, using natural products that she finds on the beaches of Grand Bahama to create pieces of art that become pieces of artwork that objet d'art that she sells to tourists. I mean, ideas like that can go across both the orange sector and the blue sector. We just have to think. In Barbados, for example, they're using the seaweed that is washed up. They are processing that to find out what they can do with it. Is it going to be a nutritious food for livestock, or are they going to use it for fertilizers for agriculture? And this is stuff that's just washed up off the ocean. Sometimes
it could be for medical, for health, my health.
Yes, of course. So thinking and reading and trying to understand what those sectors offer would be a good start.
Yes. Awesome stuff. All right, so let's go back to other screen. And then we go here. So if innovation is the currency for transformation, and we're talking about creating all these new light industries or even heavy industry if needs be, I'm just not one for the one that cancer farming. But if innovation is the currency for transformation, what's draining our account?
Well, innovation itself is driven by creativity. You know?
Okay.
In fact, the link starts with creativity, innovation, entrepreneurship. Those three things are incontrovertibly linked together. And without the creativity, we are not going to have acts of innovation. Innovation being doing something new,
Right.
not been done before, or doing something new in a context that it hasn't been applied before. Actually developing new products and services. We seem to be challenged by that in the Bahamas. If we see somebody doing something really interesting, we will copy it. We just go and copy it rather than thinking that person is doing something, but there's a way I can do it even better. I see some mistakes they're making. I see some market gaps that they have. I will go and create something even more. I'll be even more innovative than them because I'm going to think more about how their product can be better applied to its chosen market.
Right.
And of course, we prefer to copy others who have some modicum of success rather than actually trying to develop our own products and services.
Right, and that's why I said, and when we talk about the 5 pillars of the new built environment, and you talked about how Chanel laws are taking stuff out of the sea, that's a part of the sea pillar, etc., and so forth. And so all of those pillars, and tourism will still exist, so that's even more. So we could easily 10x our economy. And so if we look at this though, if innovation leads to creativity, leads to innovation, which leads to entrepreneurship. And we know that persons like Sir Franklin those are pushing for more entrepreneurs, and he did the Junior Achievement Program way back when and trying to develop them. What is draining that account though? What is holding people back? Because we know we're creative. We've always been creative. Is it capital? Is it just a mindset? Is it the fact that we don't have the education? And when I say education, when I look at I look at the academics, experience, and exposure. And you always have to have mentors and cheerleaders in order to get it done. So when we put it in that context, what would be your response to that?
Well, it's a combination of those things you mentioned. The first being capital. You know that a lot of businesses, they can start based on one's own resources, but at some point, those resources are going to be depleted. They don't have enough resources to sustain the development of a business. There needs to be a source of funds that are open to all businesses, that they can access those funds if they have a valid, legitimate idea.
Right.
To enable them to continue to grow. Now, we have the Bahamas Venture Capital Fund that funds businesses up to about $150,000 a year.
Okay.
But that's extremely selective. We have some other contributors who offer grants on a very selective basis. It's not a continual way to access these funds. So it's quite difficult to get funding. It's quite difficult to get external funding when you want to develop and grow a business. Our banks, on the other hand, are not particularly amenable to young and new businesses. In fact, I understand that it still takes a while to get to actually start a bank account. If you're starting a company and you go to a bank and you say, look, I want to open an account, this may happen or may not happen 3, 4, 5, 6 months later.
Yes.
That's not conducive to businesses starting and growing.
Yeah. And then listening to you just now, I'm thinking when you're talking about the funding, we have credit bureaus, not credit bureaus, what you call them? Like the credit companies, the credit unions. And then you have the BTC 2%, and then you have monies from the numbers fund. I don't remember what they call it, the formal name. I'm just thinking there's a lot of ways to be funded. Is this what we would be calling like in a sovereign wealth fund, or would it be different?
Well, a sovereign wealth fund would be different in that it's a collective bank account for the country.
Okay.
We're not talking something that grand at the moment. We're talking about the ability for individual businesses to access funds at
Yeah.
crucial times in their development, and that's not there.
Yeah.
There's also a lack of ideas that continue to build on market gaps as opposed to copying someone, and that is not conducive again to.
I would challenge that as a lack of ideas. I think it's a lack of people presenting their ideas. There's this massive fear that somebody's going to take the idea.
Yeah.
But I don't think we're short of ideas.
No, 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 no. When I say short of ideas, I mean original ideas, because of course I can get an idea by seeing you do something at the corner of Bay Street and East Street. I saw Dale doing that, so I'm going to actually do it at Shirley Street and Market Street. I'm going to try it down there and see if it works.
Yeah,
It's not the lack of ideas; it's the lack of original ideas.
Yeah, so they would be business people, whereas you or me, who came up with the idea at first, would be more entrepreneurial. So I'm just thinking that I'm just thinking we will do so in such a way, right? So are we applying global strategy with local soul or copying someone else's hustle without meaning?
Well, we're not. We're certainly not. We're not in a position to apply a global strategy. I mean, not like McDonald's, who is notorious for globalization plus localization, going all over the globe with their product.
Yeah, no, I don't mean us going all over. I mean us like copying what we see on the global environment and just bring it in. That's what we seem to like to do, kind of thing, right?
There's nothing wrong with copying somebody from another country and bringing it to the Bahamas. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. For example, in Britain, several of the big businesses that started around the 90s and the noughties had to do with people who had traveled overseas and gotten ideas and brought them back to the British context. That's fine.
But what if it don't have no meaning? If it's because my thing is for us to develop, it has to have meaning towards our development, and we could bring in all kind, like we brought in fast food, for example, right? And now we have plenty different versions of fast food. But what is it really doing to develop us? A couple of dollars, but how much do we send out because of the sugar rush? I call it sugar rush. Penalties that you get from having an overload of sugar.
Well, not only that, an overload of processed food, an overload of salts, and a rise in conditions, lifestyle conditions. We find it difficult to suppress. All of the conditions we have now are probably linked to diet. Most of them are probably linked to diet. And that can be traced to the rise in fast food consumption. So the things we eat, I mean, one of the things you said at the start was that we think what we become, what we eat, we are. Yeah. And we are certainly reflecting the diet that we ingest on a daily basis.
Yeah, well, the fast food lines at 11 o'clock in the night is overflowing, which is very scary to me.
Yes, I've seen it, and I've taken photos of it. I've been so amazed by it. When I drove by, I would stop and actually take a photo of the long lines of cars outside the fast food restaurants.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's because there's nothing else available to eat at that hour, or that's what people just could afford to eat. I don't know.
Well, it's fast. It's quick.
But you could have other food that's fast. But anyway, cool. So what would governance look like if we was to design like a startup, learn, accountable, and wire for impact?
Governance of the startup or governance of the country?
No, our governance, the country. Yeah. What is that supposed to look like?
Well, one, a country that creates an enabling environment.
Right.
When the World Bank, back in 2021, decided to go away from ease of business, it created a concept known as business enabling environment. And the purpose of that was to try and get governments to see that the way they can create situations that enable the businesses to operate and private sector development. Again, I mean, I hate to keep mentioning entrepreneurship, but it started with promotion of growth, economic growth through innovation and entrepreneurship. It talked about increasing equality of opportunities among market participants. And it talked about ensuring the sustainability of the economy in the long term. So not doing things that were short-term lived or looking into the next 3, 6, 9 months, but in fact, something looking well into the future.
Right.
So the government, from a governance perspective, the government is charged with making sure those elements are always in place.
So do they take that to heart, in the sense that, let's say when we went into the 67 election and then we had the change from the oligarch government to the government of the billionaire, the mass government. And because people didn't generally have means of funding, right? Then we went into the era where the government was actually the driver of a lot of the development versus the business people, where you had the Backstreet Boys and the rest who were doing all of the development per se. Would that now mean that we need to flip back from that and go back to pushing a lot of the development part back to the private sector, and the government just creates the environment for which they can be successful in?
Well, the government's role will always be one of facilitation. In certain instances, if the government can fund companies, in which case they've done, there's a couple companies in the Bahamas that are very prosperous as a result of government funding. But it's interesting you mentioned the Backstreet Boys, because the families of those 9 or so, 10 or so names,
Right.
the families still pretty much define the entrepreneurial landscape of the Bahamas.
Right,
They are families that have been around for 200-300 years in some cases, not all.
They define the fundamental or the dominant ownership of things.
Yes.
But the government is the one who actually opening the gate for the horses to come out or not. Right?
Well, it's the government that creates the environment for those businesses to operate.
Right.
And it has no other choice but to make it easy for business to operate rather than frustrating the way businesses can operate in those environments.
Yeah.
And when we talk about business enabling, which is what the World Bank is looking at the moment, the World Bank is concerned with public sector, the impact of unions, for example, something we big on in the Bahamas. But we have to mitigate the power of those organizations that don't serve a real purpose in an era where we're approaching the 6th industrial revolution. We're long past the second or the third industrial revolution, when unions did start and they were badly needed and they did us a lot of benefits. We move forward into the 6th industrial revolution. We have to leave those baggage behind. We have to think beyond those things, because having an effective and vibrant union structure in a country is a deterrent for foreign direct investment. We know that.
Cool. Yeah, but I always believe you just have to adjust, and if you can't adjust, then yes, you fall off. But if you have to move with the times. And I was just having a conversation with the CEO today, and we were talking about how in the Bahamas, some of the critical instruments of government is still stuck in a colonial, a colonial way of perceiving things and doing things. What was colonial back then, what might have been appropriate back then, but today it's not appropriate. But we still in that mode that this is okay. Mom said you had to do it this way and that when you're small, and so you're still doing that today because mom said that. Versus, okay, is it practical to do that today, and is it feasible, is it functional, etc. I don't know, understand where we go to get that out, and I don't know if there's a strategic mindset or program or direction that we need to do in order to make that adjustment.
Well, I see the comment on the screen. The government role is to provide goods and services that the public cannot provide on their own.
Or reluctant to borrow, I don't know.
Well, I'm not sure that's entirely correct, but that's not the point of this discussion. We were talking about the role of government in enabling businesses in a particular situation. So
right. Mm-hmm.
When we look at you mentioned a blueprint for the ways we look at how we can achieve that $100 billion reality, and we can't escape from the things that we should be pursuing that also become attractive to foreign direct investments. So if we had, for example, a huge talent resource, which is one of the aspects,
mm-hmm.
we would become more attractive to foreign direct investment. It's that simple. It's the reason why companies in America overfly us to go to Costa Rica, to go to St. Lucia, to go to Jamaica. They see those destinations as providing more of what they're after, which is a throughput of talent that they can use to resource their companies. Costa Rica has, 19 universities.
Mm-hmm.
We have one. Jamaica has something like, I wrote it down somewhere here. Jamaica has 41 universities.
What? All of that?
Cuba has 60 universities.
Smoke.
Haiti, get this, 39 universities and higher education institutions. We have one. We therefore do not have the infrastructure to develop that amount of talent on an ongoing basis.
So that'll be one of the strategic points we did, and we need to have more higher learning facilities.
Of course. That is critical.
Mm-hmm.
Because if education is going to be at the center of that framework to drive this $100 billion economy,
mm-hmm.
we have to do more to create more from our education.
And I always say that, if we build the balloon or put more air in the balloon, the economy grows as the balloon grows. And so then the government, when it's taxing at its 2% versus its 12 and 10%, then they could still get more than what they're getting now at the 2 and 12% because the economy has grown so much bigger. We 10x it. But I don't know if we seem to get that concept in our heads. Or we're just afraid to do the work to build it. Is that the issue?
No, quite possibly. We're a very conservative people. We're slow to change. We're slow to react. We're not given to radical change at any time in our history. We haven't been able to do it. It took 5 elections to change our first government from one to the next.
Mm-hmm.
It's those things. Those things take time because as a people, as a Bahamian people, we don't we're not that eager to change. We have a huge resistance to change.
Yeah, now we're in the 5 and out, and we look like we don't have any eagerness to change that. We just want to keep 5
Well,
and
no,
out,
we
5
just
and out,
keep
5
going
and out.
five and out. Absolutely.
That's crazy. You got to put meaning to these things, so because data without meaning won't be information. So, what is the architecture of freedom, and are our institutions scaffolding or blocking it? And I try to keep it with the construction
Well,
verbiage.
I think we started by talking about mindsets. And we started by talking about the dependency mindset that we have at the moment. Now, there's no way we can continue to be free if we continue with that level of dependency, either internally or externally.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and that's number one. We have to get rid of this infatuation with the professions and think about ways we can educate ourselves that would contribute directly to the development of the country. I mean, lawyers, they may be great and they call themselves learned, but they are consumers of wealth. I don't know any lawyer that has created wealth other than those who have got together and formed partnerships. They're not wealth creators by nature. They are wealth consumers. And similarly with us, we have to get away from this mindset that we are always looking for a job and not to create jobs. We don't want to be wealth consumers throughout our existence. We want to be able to create wealth.
Right.
I mean, that would set us free because we will always be encumbered by 300 years of slavery and colonialism. We can't divorce ourselves from that. But what we can do is lessen its impact as we go forward.
And I think the way we lessen that is we have a whole generation, Gen Z and somewhat Gen Y, who are very much entrepreneurial minded or self-standing minded, that they don't want jobs per se. They want to be able to survive on their own merit, not daddy or mommy or sister or auntie or government doing something for them. I don't, generally speaking, we do have a batch who just feel like, okay, well, let's just ride somebody else as a donkey. We'll always have that kind of thing. But when we look at that, that whole generation, we're not maximizing their potential. And so if we talk, position it to what you have been saying, if we were to enable them or even to excite them to be more dominant in our economy, then we will blow past my $100 billion threshold and be even way up there. Because if the things that you call off at the beginning of the show, I was already adding a couple more billion to my 100 billion as the monies that you could make out of those things.
Of course, and if we think about, I mentioned 4 pillars of the economy at the moment.
Right.
New Providence, Abaco, Bahama, and Exuma. But there's a reason why we shouldn't have 8.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So that would just blow us straight past. Yeah. Cool. So how do we enable the youth to want to engage and not just flee from the Bahamas?
Again, I have to point it to education. I mean, at the lower end, we see videos of kids fighting at school and fighting the police, and this is not something that we should encourage. We certainly shouldn't share it on social media.
Right.
But whereas the rest of the world is engaging in what's called cell learning, socio-economic learning, it's a full campaign to engage kids with the issues that go beyond the regular arithmetic and math in class. and looking at ways they can be more aware of their social surroundings, the way they can govern better their emotional intelligence, and be able to deal with situations where they find themselves challenged by others, particularly when it could lead to a physical altercation. I mean, these things, we have to be training our kids at a very early age.
Yeah, and I guess part of that challenge is that we have, as we say, kids training kids, or not training somebody, but it isn't the parent. So
Yes.
you got to get beyond that. So if policy was a design tool, what capital vision are we working from?
When you say capital vision,
The scope, what blueprint or what drawing or that we need to do in order for this policy to be successful. What we need to put in that policy. What
you're talking government policy.
Yes, not only government, because my thing is that we are electing a lot of people, but we're electing a lot of people who might not understand how to even develop these things, right? They're good talkers, they're good PR people, they're likable people, blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff, but are they the people who should be driving our economy, right? If they were in business, they not necessarily be the CEOs of the company. Right? They might be the marketing person and stuff like that, which is fine. Everybody has a purpose. Not everybody needs to be the CEO. And not everybody will be the CEO on a team. Right? I played baseball. There's a second baseman, first baseman, third baseman, etc. They all have different roles, but they're all important. And we somehow, to me, we got to get beyond this idea that you have to be the king, the chief, the CEO, the boss, the whatever, to be validated or what have you. So I'm just asking, from that perspective, what kind of policies we need to put in place in order to build that environment?
Well, one policy has to do, I mean, if you look at those three main areas I talked about, economy, education, and infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing about the economy at the moment, we are facing a very unbalanced immigration system. We
Mm-hmm.
have no policy for immigration.
Mm-hmm.
So we enable a large influx of basically low-skilled menial workers, when in fact we would better be served if we attracted skilled workers, if we went out and actively sought skilled workers from around the world.
But don't we do that for medium-skilled workers too? That some Bahamians always say that, but we have Bahamians who qualify for these, what I call medium-skilled workers, but they mightn't have the high aptitude, specialized niche market type skills. And you would think that the businesses would want to import those people to help uplift and build the medium ones. But it seemed like we even shut off the medium.
Yes, of course. That's why if it's a policy
Mm-hmm.
that actually enables this sort of thing, then yes, the policy would say, look, if you as a company A want to bring in 10 skilled workers next year and there's nobody in the economy who can meet those needs,
Mm-hmm.
there will be 10 visas granted for those 10 people. And it's policy ideas that would keep in balance, for example, the large number of single source migrants that we see.
Right.
We seem to have no control over it. And we therefore are building a large number of low-skilled workers, when in fact we could do better if we were actively pursuing skilled workers to help companies grow. That's one aspect.
Cool. So on that same line, then, what kind of talent culture grows architects of change? People like me, right? Not just administrators of tradition. I never liked what was already in place. I figured it always had to be better.
Well, change agents are few and far in between in the Bahamas. I mean, those that are able to do things, really, you can see the fruits of it. I mean, you mentioned Sir Franklin Wilson, who is a famous entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
They were agents of change for their time. And it's good that he's trying to assist others to do pretty much walk in the same footsteps and do something similar. But there are opportunities in the Bahamas, and there are ways you can be taught to basically spot those opportunities. At the moment, our entrepreneurship teachings, our lessons, our training is pretty rudimentary.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And we don't really train people in the differences, for example, between opportunity entrepreneurship and necessity entrepreneurship. In the Bahamas, we're lucky that most of the entrepreneurial opportunities there are opportunity-driven entrepreneurship. You know, what confounded the experts about 10 years ago? They found Uganda had the highest level of entrepreneurship for that year, and what they found was that it was mainly women who were forced to go out and sell various aspects of things they could find in the forests, on the shores. And they had this huge growth in entrepreneurship, but it was necessity-driven entrepreneurship. They were doing things as a result of having to do them in order to maintain a roof over their heads and keep food on their kids' tables. We're lucky in the Bahamas. We have opportunities, but we're not that good at spotting those opportunities. We don't have a learning training culture that enables us to spot those opportunities.
So for people's systems are designed for multiply brilliance or contain it.
Our people systems.
Yeah. Our people systems that we work in designed to multiply the brilliance that we have, that you're speaking of, all this that is needed. And I'm saying that they exist. There's just some parameters that is holding them back from jumping out the gate.
Well, that's an interesting question because, of course, we know too many cases of where individuals are frustrated in jobs. One manifestation of the fact that it would probably be this latter of those, containing it rather than multiplying it.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
People tend to have jobs for life. They value jobs for life. It's not uncommon to hear people who've been in jobs 35, 40 years, and they retire at the end of that. There's very little succession planning. If
that's a slave mentality.
Exactly. So if you multiply brilliance, one of the things you will have are succession plans right across the corporate sector. So every CEO would have a succession plan in place. Yeah?
Yeah.
We just don't have those things.
Not yet. We're coming. I can cause all that to happen. So, how do we cultivate national genius before it is exported or erased? Because we already had Christopher Columbus come here and he wiped out a whole set of indigenous people, as reported in our history books. And then you had the Pan-African slave trade that brought thousands here to the Bahamas. I think it was like 11 million or 11 billion. 11 million, I think it is. People were transported, maybe 9 million survived. So we have all these things, but it's very easy for people to get erased. So how do we cultivate this so that the Bahamas would be the place and the people don't fly over to go someplace else? People want to stop here. But I always say that investors go where they feel their investment is has integrity. There's structure to it. There's confidence. There's not this idea that it changes from minute to minute as to what are the criteria for the investment to stay good. Consistency, I think that's the word I'm looking
Well, I think investment goes where it's most welcome.
for.
And
Depends on what kind of
investment is
investment.
not going to go to countries where they find it difficult to get work, to get building permits. They find it difficult to get visas for their workers. They find it difficult to get basic contracts sorted out and government papers. I understand that customs is doing a great job of trying to make themselves more efficient. That's good because customs are a key part of that enabling environment. But we can't. We One other implication of your question has to do with not really erasure so much, but the brain drain that we face,
Right.
where we have developed people and they leave to go to college or they leave to live in another country, and they just don't have any intention of coming back. That's a very sad thing because, of course, these people have a lot to offer. And I know of Bahamians working basically in all parts of the world at the moment.
Yeah, but they don't feel valued, or they have a path that they could pursue. Yeah, a lot of them tell me that. That's what they tell me.
Yes, of course, of course. So it's a mixture of things. It's enabling the environment to attract that FDI. It's enabling the environment to attract and keep the people of their own from there. So not allowing that brain drain to happen because it's happening. And Bahamians before never actually left the country. We all came back. We stayed. Recently, people, as they go abroad, they've seen they can contribute in those economies and they go.
Right, and that's why I get people that there's in time things change and adjust, because when I was in school, I left good jobs on the table in the States, and I came back home because the Biden administration said they want to build a country and they're looking for engineers, blah, 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 and stuff like that. So I said, okay, I'll come and help. And they didn't ask me specifically, but, that was the call. I don't know if we have those type of calls consistently over the last 25 years as what it was during the Biden administration. People always ask me what was the difference between then and now, and that's one of the differences. I'm not saying nobody's perfect, because I don't think any administration was perfect along the way. So far and so, but right now we seem to be bookkeepers. We get so focused when you watch the parliament and this and the talks, especially around July or so when the budget debates are coming up, and everybody just counting pennies. And I don't see many people looking at innovative ways to use the pennies to make dollars. So the question is, investing like visionaries actually look like in the space? What would that look like? How do we create that? What strategy do we need to apply to get, if it's government who need to create the environment or the private sector who need to come off of their money? Because that's the other thing is, you talk about those families and they have significant wealth, let me call it that. But how many of them are actually investing their monies?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. But
I don't think you did, but that's the question.
Yeah,
Go
well, it's difficult to pick winners. When I worked with small businesses in London, one thing, it was a government-supported agency. One thing they tried to do with very little success was to pick winners. In other words, invest in those sectors that they thought were going to pan out. And that was almost impossible to do because they avoided key sectors that clearly were risky, but also carried very high rewards. So, for example, musicians, they failed to they totally denied musicians any financial support.
Wow.
But even though it was a sector that every so often spun out some very huge contracts for those musicians. So, in trying to invest like visionaries, we need to be able to try to do the impossible, which is pick those winners. And it's damn difficult. But with some insight, we can be better and increase our probability of success in choosing those ventures that are likely to succeed.
Ooh. Well, you've been very kind to me this evening, and you give me at least 15 plus minutes more than I had shared with you that we were going to take. And so I'm very thankful for you for that. So let me cap this by saying, where does money sleep when vision is absent, and how do we keep capital awake?
That's one I'll probably sleep on, but it's I mean, very few entrepreneurs can say hand on heart that they make money whilst they're asleep. Once you can do that, you have arrived as an entrepreneur.
Well, that's why I put it as the last question for you.
You don't you're not worried then about what happens, because you know your business is constantly generating revenues.
Right.
That's a difficult place to reach in the sector.
So does entrepreneurship reach that point, or businesses reach that point? Is there any kind of statistics on that as to which one has a bigger piece of the pie of that?
None that I'm aware of. I know that certain sectors, for example, when the internet came online around the turn of the millennium,
right,
there was a lot of firms starting up that would meet this criterion, where they would be generating funds even when the person was asleep.
Right.
And that was almost immediate. That's because of the service they were providing via the internet.
Right.
And the internet never sleeps.
Right.
So it's like New York City. You basically can be selling across the world, even though you're enjoying a good night's rest.
Yeah, siesta, something. Yeah, cool. Well, Professor, I've asked you a lot of questions, and I hope the audience was able to put it together in such a way that they gain some nuggets from it. But if you look at what we've asked, how would you tie it all together? And then, is there anything that we didn't speak of that you would want to share with us?
Not really. I think mindsets, thinking about mindsets and the linkages between freedom and lack thereof is a clear start to that. And unless we can actually shape ourselves from those mindsets of dependency, of job focus,
right,
wealth consumption rather than wealth creation, of trying to or being infatuated with the professions. Those things, those are mindsets, are ones that are always going to keep us locked into the past. And until we can actually break away from those, struggle to freedom, it will be a hard and difficult one.
Yes, I think very much so. But we haven't shied away from other challenges before, and we've won them over. And so we thank all of you who are watching us this evening and listening to these words. Hopefully it'll be of benefit for you, and so forth. And Professor, it's always a pleasure to gain from your insights. I find
Thank you for the opportunity.
very much enlightening. And hopefully everybody else will, and they can share and watch this as many times as they wish, and so forth and so forth. And I know you are long past your bedtime, so let me let you go and have a little nap before you wake back up to continue your journey up to the heights of bringing knowledge into people's head.
But one good thing about the Spanish, the Spanish are late night people.
Yeah.
That's why they have siestas in the afternoon to
In the
catch up
day,
on the loss of sleep from the night before.
All right. So thank you kindly, Professor. We'll be in touch. Okay.
Thank you very much. Bye for now.
So, folks, you've been watching Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles, and hopefully you've enjoyed the show and you've also gained some knowledge as to what can help you in your journey in getting off of the plantation and having your own freedom of mentality, so that Emancipation Day means something to you when you hear it, that you know that you've grown from one place to the next, and you'll be able to use the information and use that as inspiration to help you to strive and fight through whatever obstacles is coming in front of you, so that we don't want you to feel like you're only here by yourself out on a limb, but you have support from many people. So drop us a note, let us know where you're at, what you're thinking, what you want to do, and we'll be sure to try and chat with you online as we go.
Enjoyed the show? Then subscribe to us for more educational and inspirational content. Ring the bell so you never miss a show. Let's change the narrative, 242.